Oh, hi. I'm just trying to decide which video to do tonight. It's either the Beatles recording secrets video or my review of the book, Watching Water Boil, all 42 chapters. Just give me a second here. We'll be right back. Hey everybody, welcome to The Bottom Line. I'm Michael Noland, and tonight part 2 of my review of Geoff Emerick's book, Here, There, and Everywhere. But tonight we're not just going to be reviewing the book per se, as much as delving into some of the techniques that not only Geoff Emerick, but other valid engineers, as well as a genius producer, and some statements in the book that I thoroughly disagree with. But first, a great big shout out to all of our subscribers, 163 of you out there now. Thank you so much. The response has been wonderful. We are just now wrapping up our last week of our first 3 months here on YouTube. This is, if you can believe it, our 37th video that we've managed to put out so far. Our views are past 16,000 views. People are actually watching our videos. This couldn't happen unless a lot of people were sharing these videos with people they thought who might be interested in them. So a great big thank you to all of our viewers, as always. And now, back to part 2 of my review of Geoff Emerick's book, Here, There, and Everywhere. Okay, so in part 1, we covered a lot of the studio tricks that Geoff Emerick and other talented engineers at Abbey Road used while recording Revolver. We also discussed that before Geoff Emerick ever even arrived on the scene as George Martin's official balance engineer / assistant, that the Beatles were already pushing the bounds of sound. This, of course, was starting to happen right in the midst of many of their recordings for Help, and certainly by the time Rubber Soul arrived on the scene. With Rubber Soul, we saw the Beatles present an album that was intentionally fashioned and put together as a complete recorded product, having its own identity, its own feel. And starting with Rubber Soul, we would see the Beatles accomplish this time and time again. Now, before I go further in my review of these techniques, I do want to bring out a couple of caveats to this book. First of all, it takes away nothing of Geoff Emerick's genius when I say he gets petty in this book. His place in history was guaranteed long before this book. He received 4 Grammys, 1 for Revolver, 1 for Sgt. Pepper, which we'll be discussing tonight, 1 for Abbey Road, and 1 for Paul McCartney's Wings album, Band on the Run. He even received a technical Grammy on top of these 4 awards. Any Beatle historian knows the man accomplished great things in the studio. But like anyone, he was just a man, and evidently could be at times quite petty. His overall analysis and general feelings toward George Martin are totally untoward. George Martin was a genius. Yes, he needed technical boffins, but he needed them to accomplish what he was translating from the Beatles. And Geoff Emerick's assassination of George Harrison is abysmal. Even referring to how he would look visually sometimes as gaunt or as somebody so reclusive that he never tanned. These kind of assessments and statements in the book just show that he could be a very petty man. So that's my statement on some of his personal feelings about George Martin, George Harrison. But either way, it does not take away from the man's genius, and he has taught me so much over the years. Tonight, we're going to be discussing some of those tips and tricks that he used to create the masterpiece, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. You know, the very first recordings for this project, it wasn't even known as Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band at that point. The band came into the studio to record their next masterpiece. At the top of the list were 3 songs. One was John's magnificent Strawberry Fields Forever, as well as 2 of Paul's songs, Penny Lane and When I'm 64. Of course, the very first song they would set to work on was John's magnificent Strawberry Fields Forever. So John Lennon even brings in a new toy, a brand new instrument and a marvel of technology at the time, the hallowed Mellotron. Later, when the Beatles actually added Moog synthesizer to Abbey Road, it was merely a flavor they would use for this recording. Other bands would take this instrument and identify themselves with it. But to the Beatles, their palette wide, it was something to be investigated. Now, the Mellotron basically came with 3 banks of taped, recorded music. And depending on what key you hit, it would play the note of that instrument. A prelude to modern synthesizers, certainly. It also, like a lot of Casio keyboards from the late 60s through the early 80s, came with a collection of pre-played little samba pieces, a brass section with a Jimmy Durante, yeah, at the end, and even a rather serious recording of a flamenco guitar. The very recording he would use on the continuing story of Bungalow Bill on the White Album a short time later. But it was Paul who would look at the instrument and see it as a possible piece of orchestration for this completely new and wonderful song. You see, with the Mellotron, you had 3 choices. You could choose either strings, flute, or choir. Paul latched on the idea of flute, and this is where he developed the intro of Strawberry Fields Forever. For the distinctive drum sound for the song, Ringo dampened his drums with towels. Extra close miking on those drums provided this wonderful, powerful, muffled sound. Okay, but the work didn't stop there. As a matter of fact, it had barely begun. And this is a point I want to make in this next series of videos. So what I want to do in these next few Friday releases is take a look at the actual recording process. And some of those videos will be focusing on only a handful of songs and some only one. For tonight, it's Strawberry Fields Forever. Now, with the Beatles recording the basic tracks, Paul on the Mellotron, and everyone assigned to their post, you would have thought that would have been a complete song. And indeed, it had its charms. The lyrics carry the song. Now, John's presence on Sgt. Pepper is a bit limited. You can give him credit for writing 5 songs, co-writing with a little help from my friends with Paul, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, For the Benefit of Mr. Kite, Good Morning, and of course the magnificent A Day in the Life. But I have to say that it's John's songs that flavor this album with just a little bit of acid, with lyrics that are seemingly designed to only make sense if you were high on LSD. It's in his songs where you really get the LSD flavor of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. So where would they take this recording next? Now, John had been listening to the mix of Strawberry Fields Forever for a while now, and he came into the studio one day complaining that he wanted it to sound heavier. Now, with John Lennon, you usually got requests like, I want my voice to sound like the color yellow. And he was being almost as vague this time. It was George Martin, by the way, who suggested adding some orchestra to really give it a power. But John, quite uncharacteristically, I might add, right away even requested the specific instruments that he wanted in the orchestra on the song. So while there is a truth that John could be vague in his descriptions of what he wanted in his song, often leaving it up to Paul to translate Lennonese to Martinese. But this time he articulated himself well, and George Martin got to work. Now here's why we're taking an entire video on this one song, and that's the fact that Strawberry Fields Forever received more recording time, more energy put in, more changes into that song than any other John Lennon song ever recorded with the Beatles, including his magnificent A Day in a Life. After they recorded the orchestra that John wanted, he listened to it, he was happy with it, but then a few days passed. And that's when he came into the studio telling George Martin that, yeah, that's okay, but you know, I really like the beginning of the first one we did. And being non-technical John, he said, can't we just marry up the two pieces? The only problem was John evidently wasn't paying attention to the keys they were recorded in. You see, the two versions were a semitone apart. Not only that, they were also at different tempos. George Martin tried to explain this to John, with John just saying, you can fix it, and walking out of the studio, leaving the dirty job to George Martin and his team to figure out. Now this is where Geoff Emerick and George Martin started talking. One of them brought up the fact that, you know, they were recorded at different tempos, but they're not that far off. And as for the semitone, if we adjusted the tempo, maybe that would make up for the semitone. So they would have to join these two tapes. The only problem with joining these two tapes with your average 45-degree cut that you would normally do in editing is that would present a far too jarring event in the recording. The listener would hear the change not only in tempo, but in tone as well. So Geoff Emerick said he did one of the shallowest slicing jobs he ever did with tape. Instead of a 45-degree cut, we get this very long cut, basically a crossfade, artistically cut by the man, then played for John. John listened to it and asked Geoff, after the transition had occurred, has it happened yet? With Geoff Emerick smiling at John saying, yes, it has. John was elated. Now we had this very beautiful, simple intro to the song, as well as this most powerful, magnificent ending of the song. Envisioned by John, translated by George Martin, and done by Geoff Emerick. This is what I call the Beatle machine, with all four Beatles even taking up the job of percussion to add minutiae to this wonderful song. The end result was something that pop music had never heard before. For the first time, we were hearing Lewis Carroll, so to speak. The images this song brings up are as good as any special effects I've ever seen in my life in any movie when I listen to this song. The relentless chase of sound, the pursuit of perfection, and just a touch of genius from the writer himself, along with an equally great song provided by Paul, Penny Lane, which we will discuss in our next video. The Beatles would put out their double A side, and in England, it went to number 2. They were beat out by Engelbert Humperdinck, but in the States, straight to number 1, of course. But this would take these 2 tracks off Sgt. Pepper, and to tell you the truth, I have my own personal Sgt. Pepper playlist. In that playlist is Sgt. Pepper with the addition of Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane. To me, this is the album that should have been presented to us, and this is how I listen to them. Of course, Paul gets a bump on that playlist as well as John, but with the addition of Strawberry Fields Forever, I just feel that Sgt. Pepper would have transcended even higher than it is in our minds today. You know, the Beatles had an unwritten rule. The word no was never used while attempting to record their music. They wouldn't have tolerated it. And fortunately for them, they had men on the team who were not only willing to do the job, but quite capable. Geoff Emerick, a genius, true. But it is around this time that Richard Lush landed on the scene, and many of the miking techniques used in Sgt. Pepper was done by him. He was Geoff Emerick's assistant. So that about wraps it up for our video tonight. In our next video, we'll be starting off with Penny Lane, as well as a couple of other key Sgt. Pepper recordings. Once again, a great big shout out to all our brand new subscribers, 163 of you. A big thank you to all of you who have shared our videos, and an even bigger thank you to all of our viewers. The channel has achieved over 16,000 views at this point, and we have done so in less than 3 months. So a great big thank you. Consider subscribing to the tribe, of course. Hit that top bell notification and you'll be notified of all future videos. This is Michael Noland. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you down the road. It's time to say